Well, first of all, I'm actually happy to see this kind of passion, which I think is also anger. And I don't mean that condescendingly. I was just talking to Ryan Grimm, and I've talked to a couple of friends of mine in journalism about the fact that, I mean, for me personally, at least, I don't remember seeing as like sustained of a humanitarian crime, as barbaric and savage of a bombing campaign as what we've seen since October 7th. Obviously, I actually do think that a lot of what took place in Israel by Hamas on October 7th was morally horrific and unjustifiable. But I knew what was coming. And I think what you are putting your finger on is so important. First of all, every year that goes by, history that as you get older, you're going to see this, that you live through will become deader and deader to more and more people. So every year, there are a lot of people who didn't live through 9/11 or who were too young to really have taken in the lessons of what it was like. And part of the reason why I've been just so apoplectic about the reintegration of neocons into the Democratic Party, the celebration of people like Bill Kristol and Liz Cheney, David Frum, all of those warmongering scumbags, is because I remember what they did after 9/11. 9/11 was like my political reawakening. I wasn't really focused that much on politics. I was working as a lawyer. I was building my law practice. I was doing constitutional law. I wasn't very political. I would read the New York Times, the Atlantic, and the New Yorker every day and think I was getting the full picture, more or less. And what kind of impelled me to start writing about politics was this attack on just basic civil liberties. We were watching American citizens being arrested on U.S. soil under the Bush administration and imprisoned with no charges, not any ability to even speak with people in the outside world, simply because George Bush declared them an enemy combatant without even a judicial hearing or a trial. The things that you never thought you would see as an American citizen, these lines being crossed one after the next, obviously the opening of Guantanamo, these due process-free zones in Bagram, the implementation of torture regimes, the CIA was kidnapping people off the streets of Europe and sending them to Syria and Egypt or to Guantanamo to be tortured, calling it rendition. And the savagery and what all this authoritarianism we saw after 9/11 came because, as you referenced in that tweet that I posted this morning, the idea was, and this is what George Bush said explicitly on September 20th, 2001, when he addressed the joint session of Congress in a speech written by David Frum, the new MSNBC and liberal hero, was he said, the world now has a choice to make. Either you stand with us or you stand with the terrorists. There's no middle ground. And that became the framework. So everybody who stood up after 9/11 and said, I think this war goes too far. I think it's unjustifiable. I think this illegal spying and this warrantless spying is dangerous. I think the Patriot Act is way too radical. Those people got instantly branded unpatriotic, on the other side, pro-Al-Qaeda, and it destroyed the ability to have any dissent in this country. Fox News often led the way. Again, professors lost their jobs for saying things like the United States got a little bit of blowback, that they didn't just attack us because they hate our freedoms, but because we were doing violence in their countries and imposing dictatorships in that region. And I had heard for the last 10 years from conservatives, you know what, we were wrong. Matt Taibbi went on Fox News a month ago, and Greg Gutfeld, this is before the Hamas attack, prepared like some dumb little jingle.
Oh yeah, the pinnacle of Matt's career.
Yeah, and he was like, oh, I'm sorry, Matt Taibbi. You know, I never knew Matt Taibbi was a leading critic of the war on terror, but whatever. The idea was that, you know, Greg Gutfeld, he said this about me before, that they've come to see the evils of the CIA, the FBI, the Homeland Security. All these things just disappeared the minute that it was time for a war with Israel. And I, you know, was joking with you guys when you invited me onto your show, and I said, you know what, half of the reason I'm coming on is so I can yell at some members of your audience, because when you guys did that segment where I attacked Dave Rubin and a bunch of other frauds on the right who have built their careers pretending they believe in free speech and oppose censorship and cancel culture, who turned on a dime the minute Israel was involved in a war and started cheering censorship and firing of pro-Palestinian students and putting pro-Palestinian students on a blacklist. I saw a bunch of people, you know, in your chat and your comments, since I am a Vanguard fan, I watch those sort of things.
I told you guys, the show the stars watch.
Exactly. And they were saying, oh, Glenn Greenwald suddenly realized that his friends on the right don't really believe in free speech. I didn't just suddenly realize that. In fact, I've done shows, entire shows over the last 2 years to the conservative members of my audience to say, if you want to believe you believe in free speech, if you suddenly are now on my side because I'm a critic of the U.S. security state, you can't have this gigantic exception called Israel for your alleged beliefs in free speech. You're anti-war, posture, and I've talked a lot about these stories that I have reported on where many, many red states, Andrew Cuomo did the same thing, actually enacted laws that said, if you want to have a job with the state, if you want to be a contractor of the state government, you have to sign a vow that you don't support a boycott of Israel. You're allowed to boycott any other country you want. You can boycott South Korea or Peru or China or whatever. You can even boycott other states. Andrew Cuomo led a boycott of Indiana and North Carolina in response to the trans bathroom bill that they had enacted. And then he turned around and said, if you boycott Israel, we're going to boycott you. And by executive order said anyone who supports a boycott of Israel or participates in it in any way cannot get a job with the state. This is as grotesque a violation of the First Amendment as it gets. Fortunately, federal courts have said that. But there was a lot of support for that by conservatives that came from red states, from evangelical voters who worship Israel, from American Jews who have a great affinity for it, from national security hawks who love Israel. So there's always been this gigantic inconsistency or exception to the right's free speech beliefs or alleged free speech beliefs that I've talked about for many years and knew about. And so this doesn't surprise me, but it does actually sicken me. And because I honestly don't understand how you can be someone like Barry Weiss or Dave Rubin or all these people who have been going around for years now saying, oh, this victimhood narrative is for little snowflakes who need to toughen up, and oh, they don't want to be exposed to any views that make them uncomfortable or feel threatened, poor little babies, and they'll suddenly embrace those exact ideas because now suddenly the group that's claiming it is a group to which they belong. And they have empathy for those concerns rather than some other group to which they don't belong, which they can scoff at and mock because they lack empathy of any kind and the ability to see things through the eyes of people who aren't like them. So this is not something that has surprised me. This is something I've been badgering about for a long time. But I think the idea that we went through 20 years of pretending at first to be so fanatical in the war on terror that we were going to let Bush and Cheney do anything in the name of fighting terror, only to then come to realize that that was a gigantic mistake, that we allowed a bunch of authoritarian measures to be integrated into our political system. We went around killing huge numbers of people all over the world under both Bush and Obama in the name of fighting terror. And now you have the IDF going to its social media pages and they're posting, either you stand with Israel or you stand with the terrorists. They're copying consciously what Bush and Cheney did. And a lot of American conservatives are applauding like seals. And we are now back in this environment where either you cheer for everything that the Israeli government is doing and Joe Biden government is doing, or you stand accused of being a bigot, a racist, an anti-Semite, and a supporter of Hamas and a supporter of terrorism. And it's just unbelievable to watch this group of people who claim to abhor those tactics for so long suddenly use them. And the irony, the oddity of it is that at least in 9/11, that was actually a case where our country was attacked. I lived and worked in 9/11 in New York on 9/11. I remember being in Manhattan on that day. That was a truly traumatizing event. I understand why Americans overreacted for a few weeks or a couple months. Our country wasn't attacked on October 7th. A foreign country was. And so the idea that we're now going to fire people and roll back free speech rights and ban protest and ban student groups the way Ron DeSantis did in Florida, banning a pro-Palestinian group because a foreign country got attacked is even more unbelievable. But it really shows the true nature of American political culture and a large segment, not by no means all, but a large segment of American conservatives in the American right.